Good evening, YouTube, and welcome to the Piper Report. Now, I'm definitely going to be going over this on my weekly crap recap later this week, and I wasn't really going to talk about it at all because I think I've said a lot about Congress and congressional Republicans in particular, but I can't help myself. This spending bill is one of the worst spending bills to ever come out of a Republican majority Congress. The fact is that Republicans are not conservatives. I am fiscally conservative, and for once, I would actually like a conservative spending bill. I think the last one we had was Calvin Coolidge, and guess what? Calvin Coolidge not only had a balanced budget and a surplus, he had one of the highest economic impacts in the 20th century. They call it the Roaring Twenties, for God's sakes. Reagan was good with taxes, but Reagan also increased spending. Nowadays, it's almost literally impossible to cut 1% of spending. To give you an example of what Calvin Coolidge did and Warren Harding, the first year in office, they cut the spending by 65%, the second year by 50%, and then Coolidge on his third year, another 45%. It went from 18 and some change billion to 6 billion to 3 billion. That is insane. I mean, that is a lot. We don't even do 1% this year. So the Democrats, once again, got everything they wanted because, just like the Republicans always do, they always acquiesce to every time a Democrat gets in a hissy fit. Oh, Bill O'Reilly, he's a rapist. All right, we're going to fire Bill O'Reilly. Oh, I think that Mike Flynn is involved with Russia. All right, we're going to fire Mike Flynn. Well, Jeff Sessions shouldn't be investigating Russia because he had a chance encounter with Ambassador one time 2 years ago. Okay, we'll get rid of him too. Every time. And I am not a Republican. I cannot stand the Republicans in Congress, but I am fiscally conservative. So with that regard, I am conservative. And it makes me mad when we have self-proclaimed conservatives, and a lot of these Republicans run as conservatives, and there is literally nothing conservative about them. Nothing conservative about them. So let's go over some of this failed budget. The Republicans acquiesced to the Democrats. Democrats literally got everything they wanted. Everything they wanted. Here we go. I'll skip some of this stuff. Well, I'll read the second paragraph here. Here we stand just after the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, and Congress has struck a deal to avoid a government shutdown by passing a $1 trillion plus omnibus spending bill that does not fund the most conservative parts of the Trump agenda. Okay. Trump should have let the government shut down. He should have. But he was afraid, like many other Republicans are, that they would get blamed for it. Yeah, but the thing is with that is that you will always be blamed for everything. So even though it sucks, I understand it sucks, it's time to take a stand. It's time to say, you know what, I don't give a shit. You can blame me all you want, but we're going to get what we want. We always acquiesce to your demands. This time, you are going to acquiesce to our demands. This would have been the perfect opportunity for them to grow some backbone and show their integrity and their dedication to what they're going to achieve, to what the Republican voters or the American people voted them in to do. But they didn't. They failed. They gave up willingly and freely, just like they always do. Let's see here. Trump's skinny budget proposals that actually made government smaller turned out to be just that, proposals. Democrats forced Republicans to back off from key promises, like funding the border wall with the magic words, government shutdown. None of the cuts to government spending touted by OMB Director Mick Mulvaney made it into the deal, but a bunch of Democrat priorities did. The government is still funding the baby organ harvesters at Planned Parenthood. Government checks are still being cut to sanctuary cities that harbor murderers and rapists from federal immigration enforcement. There's nearly $3.1 billion for refugee resettlement, an increase in the cap on migrant workers under the H-2B visa program. 99% of the EPA's budget was protected, and the Dodd-Frank regulation survived. Wow. Okay. What was it that the proposal was for EPA? Like, cut it by, I think, 40% or something like that, and 99% of the EPA's budget survived? The EPA is good for fear-mongering. People think that if you cut the EPA, the earth will be destroyed within a few years. That is not true. The states still have the power to mandate carbon emissions and things of that nature. The EPA just acts as an overseer to it all. you can actually do constitutional amendments to dictate certain aspects of environmental concerns if you want to. You don't need to have the EPA. I mean, we can keep the EPA, but you don't need to spend how much you're spending. I think I did a video in the past where regulations imposed by the EPA cost the U.S. taxpayers, I think it was like $300 billion a year, something like that. That's no exaggeration either. I'll try to find the video of it. So I'm not for really getting rid of the EPA, but we can definitely cut it. Now, the Dodd-Frank regulation survived. I'm no fan of the big banks, so I do think they need regulations, but I think they need to regulate at the source, the Federal Reserve, and not go after the, I guess you could say, the symptoms from the source. We should treat the illness, the Fed, and not those who benefit from the Fed. 3.1 for refugee resettlement. Yeah, I hope that doesn't mean refugee resettlement in other countries. And I bring that up because Obama's spending bills, he actually got money to decorate mosques overseas. He got money to spend millions of dollars on pottery classes for Moroccan kids. He got money for a General Patton impersonator for the White House party. I mean, he got a lot of irrelevant things that we do not need as taxpayers. So, the refugee resettlement, I'm kind of curious exactly about that. Sanctuary cities, that is horrible. That's one thing you should stand tough on, because the thing with this is, once you acquiesce to your principles, first off, if you ever give up your principles easily, they're not principles, because principles are things you stand by no matter what. But once now you give up these principles, we'll just say for the sake of argument, like sanctuary cities, the Democrats know now. They know that they can threaten a government shutdown anytime in the future whenever you have something in a spending bill that they do not like in the future, sanctuary cities, they can threaten a government shutdown. And once more, the Republicans will acquiesce because they don't want to be called names. Planned Parenthood, now, personally, I'm pro-life, but I believe in pro-choice. If it was up to me, if I was in a situation, I would probably have a kid. I've never been in that situation, so I cannot say for sure. That being said, though, I don't believe the government should be able to dictate what happens to other people's lives. I know the whole argument, the kid is a life too. I'm not going to get into the abortion argument here. That's just my opinion. So Planned Parenthood, I wouldn't mind them cutting funding from there. I wouldn't really say get rid of them, but definitely cut a lot of funding, which it doesn't appear they did. Let's go down a little bit. There's even a $300 million, roughly, Puerto Rico bailout. Jesus. So Puerto Rico bailout, what does that mean? That means that the banks, the federal banks of the U.S. are going to fund their, let's just read it. Puerto Rico gets bailed out, but unborn babies at the mercy of abortionists haggling over the price of their internal organs don't. How are any of these spending priorities under Republican-controlled Congress different from those from the Democratic-controlled legislation under Obama? Okay, I thought this would say about the bailout, but it doesn't. So the bailout was probably going to be the banks. The banks probably went on an end run because people wanted their money back. So whenever we bail out foreign entities, that is a cost to the taxpayers because we bail them out by printing fiat money. Fiat money is inflation. Inflation is a hidden tax because the more money that's printed, the more your dollars devalue. And while we're on the economy subject here, that's a big thing to point out, is that progressives want to do a lot of spending, but what they don't understand that the more government spending that occurs, the worse it is on the poor people, because government spending is done by creating fiat money, because we cannot borrow enough to actually spend to cover the programs. So the more fiat money you print out, the more your dollars devalue. And since rich people have a lot more money than poor people, they can afford to lose some devaluation of their currency. But the poor people making paychecks, living paycheck to paycheck, they are the true ones that get hurt from this. I think a lot of Democrats miss that, or they really don't want to tell anybody that. Government programs may sound good, spending may sound good, but if it's from the Federal Reserve and inflation, you are actually hurting the poorest of the poorest, the worst. And you're not hurting the rich like they want you to believe. So what did Republicans claim to win? The wins Republicans are claiming are far cries from what's needed. The bill includes an additional $12 billion in defense spending, which is $18 billion less than President Trump asked for. Now, you all probably heard my opinion on this. I think we should cut government spending. We spend more than the next 14 countries combined. If anything, do a pay cap on it. So don't cut it, but don't raise it. Just reallocate some of those funds to areas that may need some, rejuvenation, for lack of a better word. There's also $1.5 billion for border security, but no wall, which again is about half of what the president said was needed. The primary responsibility of the federal government, national security, is underfunded, according to the executive branch's budget request, while the rest of the $1 trillion omnibus bill funds already bloated government programs to further drive up the deficit. Now with this, from what I heard, is that the $1.5 billion for border security is not actually for a deportation force or the wall. So I'm kind of curious what it's for. Ted Cruz had a good idea, actually. Ted Cruz said that Trump should use confiscated drug money to fund the border wall. And heaven knows we have enough of that. But I think a lot of that money is being used for CIA operations. According, if we want to believe whistleblowers from the 90s, Bill Clinton during his time and George Bush, a lot of the money we receive from drugs overseas and stuff like that, we actually use to fund CIA operations and black operations and JSOC and stuff like that. I think there even is, it's more than a theory, I think there's even confirmation that the U.S. was involved in selling the opium poppy in Afghanistan, the Papaver somniferum plants. So it's not like the U.S. is innocent. Planned Parenthood, sanctuary cities, and refugee resettlement funded despite the need to fight courts. Border wall will not be funded. What else we got in here? To review, the Democrats and minority got nearly everything they wanted, while Republicans, and specifically conservatives, got screwed. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is celebrating. This agreement is good agreement for the American people. It takes the threat of a government shutdown off the table. The bill ensures taxpayer dollars aren't used to fund an ineffective border wall, excludes poison pill riders, and increases investments in programs that the middle class relies on, like medical research, education, and infrastructure. Translation: we kept all the conservative priorities out of the bill, so it's a win for Democrats. And it looks like Nancy Pelosi, who should be in the psych ward, also agreed. I think that says it all. I think if you have Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, two of the most idiotic members of Congress, the most biased members of Congress, perhaps, the most literally just batshit crazy, they don't know what they're talking about members of Congress, if they are both congratulating the bill, if they are both saying it's a good bill, I think that means that it is a bad bill for conservatives. You could say it's a bad bill for Republicans, but since Republicans are now further left than centrists, I really don't know if you'd call them that anymore. Like I said, I will probably go over this again during my weekly crap recap, but I kind of want to go over some of the stuff here because it's unreal. It really is unreal that the Republicans just do not have any backbone at all. None at all. And I'm done.